Hey guys, everybody, welcome to Biomassed episode 15. If you're listening to this, you're probably doing it on iTunes or YouTube. We are not live streaming this week and maybe not next week, but we will be posting this up and pinging everybody on Twitter and on the forum. So appreciate everybody that's bearing with us, and Ian, thanks a lot. And usually the shows where we don't stream or we don't have a big live audience, it becomes kind of interesting. For whatever reason, you get more relaxed on it. But we've got I think a pretty fun lineup tonight. A couple things we're going to talk about will be some of the activities in the CPM1, and we'll turn that over to a couple of our CPM1 candidates to kind of talk through that. Or correction, I guess you're not candidates anymore. You're really CPM guys, which is mildly scary. But
you did the same spiel for 10 weeks, so it's
I know. Yeah, I know. I'm actually just glad we're into kind of steady state operations at this point. So we've got. I'll run down the guest list here in a second, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the activities of the CPM, like literally what are they doing in terms of what are their agenda items, talking to CCP and things like that. We're also obviously going to talk about the releases for Hotfix Charlie. The final numbers that CCP Rought released, or at least what appears to be the 98% final numbers, he's put a Google Docs up. A lot of people have seen it and commented on it, and we're going to talk through that a little bit. And we'll probably have a little bit of fun with a few other things at the end of the show. But with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and start right out with intros, and after that, we'll push right into CPM1 roundup. So Cross Atu.
Howdy, I'm Cross Atu. I'm still with OSG, sort of in perpetuity, and I'm going to give a brief, unscripted shout-out here to one of our Biomassed Green Room frequent flyers, and remind him that he is indeed Mr. Bigglesworth in disguise.
Oh, well played. Iron Wolf.
Hello, I'm Iron Wolf Saber. I'm CP1 elect still, and just messing around in my own little solo corp still.
Okay. Hey, and Pokey?
I'm Pokey Dravon, CEO of OSG Planetary Operations and co-host here on Biomassed.
Soraya?
Yep. I'm Soraya Xel. I'm an alliance leader of the Top Men Alliance, and I'm also a member of the Bastion and EVE Online. I'm a co-host here on Biomassed, and I'm a member of CPM1.
Nice. And Zatara?
Hello. My name is Zatara, and I am a member of CPM1.
Yeah, that was Princess Zatara.
He's trying desperately to work through the whole voice comms thing. I know. It's okay, though. And I'm Jaysyn Larrisen. I'm a co-host here on Biomassed, and I'm a member of OSG Planetary Operations on the Dust side. And I am currently looking for Corp on the Eve side, so if anybody's got any ideas, throw me a link. And what we're going to be talking about tonight, like I said, is a little bit of CPM1 roundup business. And then we'll move into a few other topics. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Soraya Xel. And before I do that, a quick reminder. So as I do my beer math here, we've got 4 CPM members that will be here. So one of the things that I've asked them to do before they get on the show, I think probably about every week you're gonna get probably Soraya leading off a sort of what's been going on in the CPM, sort of what are they talking about, or what are the things that they can let the players know that they're actively engaging CCP on. But one of the things I did ask them to do is make sure that, like, when one of them is bringing up a particular issue or is sort of the lead dog for one of the big issues or something. So if Soraya is the guy who's going to work on tanks because he hates tanks or whatever, but what it should do is for you guys out in the audience is it lets you know, and just saying instead of hey, all random CPM guys, please answer my question. You can target your comments to them, and that will probably help them carry your message, or at least get your feedback to CCP, or make sure that it's circulated in the right way. And they're probably also eventually going to be the guys who are going to be able to give you the best answer on that given topic, just because it'll be something that they might be championing. Now, all of the CPM members will probably be able to answer something about anything, but like usual, you will find a few that are really, really good at some things, or pay more attention because that's where their specialties lie, or where they have the biggest voice. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Soraya and let him take it away.
Yeah, I was just gonna go with what we got done this week. Pretty much was we got to meet with CCP Rought, and it was at a particularly unholy hour of the morning. I think there's a special place for people who make me get up at that time.
Yeah.
But it was.
Expect more of those.
Yeah, well, it was a really great meeting, and I just have to say that this is my first time meeting directly with CCP Rought, and he is incredibly approachable about pretty much anything you throw out there at him. And so I think we had a good productive discussion. We talked, obviously about what was coming in Charlie. It's not really a period where we could throw extra things in for Charlie, though, of course. So we were, of course, talking about what's next on the docket as well. But it was, really, really good discussion. I think all of us got a few different items in there that he was taking notes on. So the big thing to encourage people is if you have a specific, piece of feedback of where you would like to see, what you need to see in hotfixes coming forward, please get it to one of your CPM 1 members, because we will try and get it in front of them.
I am Groot.
Excellent. Just so everybody knows, we will be injecting a series of those throughout the audio cast. So actually, I did have a question for you, Soraya, if you don't mind. Is there, if you guys, like between you and Cross and Iron Wolf and Zatara, is there anything you can share with the audience in terms of like what are the 1 or 2 things that are kind of on your initial agenda that you are going to be focusing some of your engagements with the community on and CCP on in terms of things you want feedback on or things specifically you would like to kind of take on? Obviously, understanding that you're still getting your feet under you and you're kind of working through all the initial throes of getting the CPM 1 up at a high hover right now. So I'd really just kind of like to tee that off. How about you, Soraya?
Well, my long-term thing, which is to jump up and down on the need for a link between Eve and Legion. But in the real short term, I think that the big question that's going to be really good for people to have feedback on, especially as Charlie itself rolls out, is how people feel about swarm and dropship balance. It's been an interesting topic of discussion, and obviously that's kind of one of those things that it took a while to get to addressing, and I'm very curious how it's going to work out in practice personally. So it actually has been a very lively discussion too, in terms of vehicle and anti-vehicle balance. We've had some of us go back and forth on it. I'm of course always much to some people's disappointment. I like nerfing vehicles, but there's people to debate me on that, so it's good. I think it's good that to have people that disagree on topics. So
I can personally tell you, like, one of the things that that I've definitely wanted to put forward has been, I've been saying this for a little while, and it's one of these, we're talking mostly about, this meeting was mostly about, hot fixable things. This isn't changing the landscape of dust drastically or anything like that. It's not things that are going to require 1.9. This is just things that are on the, plausibly on the table. And one of the things that I brought up was removing the splash from large rail turrets. This has just been a frustration of mine for a long time, that rail tanks have seemingly been able to cover outside objectives with a rail tank, feasibly, because without any worry about whether they're having to aim the shot or not, because as long as they're hitting the broadside of the barn inside the objective, the splash will kill you in 4 hits before you can get a hack off. So that's definitely something I've definitely wanted to put forward, and it is something that I mentioned to CCP Rought.
Okay. Go ahead, guys.
I'm still spending all of my time just sort of wallowing in the concept of emergence. I don't think anyone's shocked by my addiction continuing, but kind of breaking that down outside of jargon, it's looking at more content for Dust. Obviously, we don't have the option to add stuff in the strictest sense right now with UI limitations and client limitations as far as updates, but adding in some of the potential content that was there with better balance, improving content that's present, like working on role health and equipment improvements, so forth. I've really gotten to enjoy working with Sir Manboy on this, and it's been kind of pleasant getting to know him more directly because it seems like we have a lot of the same ideas here, possibly sometimes to the chagrin of a couple of our fellow CPMs, but as Soraya mentions, that's all good for the game balance as well. And then working with Judge, learning dropship stuff, just because it's one of my weak areas, so having him kind of give me some pointers and show me how to actually fly has been an interesting experience as well, kind of shake the tree a bit.
Yeah, one of the things I just want to throw in there is just an answer to. I know that during campaigning, me and Judge didn't exactly hit it off, but we've actually had some really great conversations, and I've been impressed. I think it's been a good conversation with everybody I've dealt with so far in the group. So.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I admit that I had certain concerns going in about the potential for excessive friction that would make things less than constructive in chambers, and I have been just universally pleasantly surprised by how well everyone's actually working together, calling out their own biases, and engaging in constructive conversation regardless of the topic.
Oh, that's usually a good sign anytime you're trying to go through the whole forming, storming, norming process. So that's actually one of the things I'm really glad you guys are saying is that was a concern I had. At least I know when I made my ballot, I really looked, even though technically only one of your votes really counted, I was really looking when I laid on that 7-person ballot of the 7 folks that would probably work the best as a group or as a unit. So at least that was how my thought process went. So I was really glad to hear that you guys think you're starting to gel a little bit even this early on. So I think that's a solid thing.
Well, and one of the wonderful things was Judge actually approached me in particular, and I don't know if he approached anyone else, and we just had a really cool conversation, and there were just definitely some things during the campaign that I wondered about, when I came to voting about not only who would be able to contribute effectively and in what capacity, but also, that teamwork dynamic was a concern on the table, and I have no concerns or qualms at all. Like everyone that I've seen and worked with has just been really, really, it's been wonderful.
Good deal. Iron Wolf, anything in particular that you're I guess not really taking up the charge for, but continuing the push for in Dust?
Yes, I'd like to see at least standard dropships become useful in transporting people again, because they've been left out in the dirt in that role for a very long time.
Okay, well, I mean that's all pretty good stuff. I really appreciate you guys actually having a conversation with us, and one of the good things that hopefully we'll be able to sustain the podcast over time and give you guys a couple of different outlets. Are any of you looking at blogging or putting up anything semi-formal, or sort of like the routine forum posts or anything like that? Have you guys started to talk about how you want to engage the community in a sort of a systematic way?
We briefly brought it up, but we haven't really made any decisions on that. I mean, I personally would kind of like to see some sort of central repository of information when we speak, even if it's not even if it's posted from elsewhere or something. One of my personal things is anything that's said in a podcast or a video or whatever, I think should also be posted. I think it's ideal to have things in multiple mediums for people. So
one thing that I was, so essentially there was a one of the avenues of information that me and SMB share is on Reddit. We use the Dust 514 subreddit frequently. Both him and I have I see him a lot on there with me, just talking it up. And somebody mentioned that as well, how are you going to do an RSS feed or something like that? And so I've essentially come to the conclusion that I think what I'm going to do is just set up a blog and just basically create, topic points and how I feel about a certain subject. And at the same time, I think I'm going to have a different section of it that just essentially goes through. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and search on a daily basis the other members of the CPM and myself, and then link their posts that they've posted to any topics or of interest that I feel are important, and then basically lay out my opinion on what they've said or something like that. And, not critique them, but essentially just maybe like a stamp of approval from old Zatara here or something like that, where it's just my comment on or just relaying the information on the blog, because I think that people do want to know, have an interest individually on where we stand on things, and I think that it's important that we try and give as many avenues as we can for the player base to understand, hey, we're actually involved. Yes, we do care, because oftentimes it feels like, even just in the beginning moments of entering the CPM term proper, that a lot of this is behind, that no one is ever going to know exactly what, our contribution is. And so I think trying as much as possible to make, our be as involved as plausible is going to be crucial to helping the player base understand that we do care,
No, I think that's probably a good roundup of that. Any other thoughts real quickly from the CPM members, guys?
If we didn't already mention it, SMB, Sir Manboy did. I knew that he wish he could have been here, but I know he's going to want to have told you that he will be pushing for team deploy a lot, and for faction warfare specifically, that's one thing that I think is going to be a frequent thing that he's going to push, and that was something that he planned to go into that meeting with, and did mention it.
Cool. Well, I mean, I know that there's been some interesting talk about that previously in terms of. There was a school of thought, I think, by some of the CPM Zero, that if you had team deploy in faction warfare, it would break it, and that's a very difficult thing for me to wrap my head around, because it doesn't seem like that would necessarily be the case. But anyway, I personally applaud that effort. If that's what he's going to take up in charge with, I'm 100% supporter of that. So I'll be interesting to see how that goes, and I'll definitely be following it. So with that, what I'd like to do, guys, is go ahead, Cross. I'm sorry.
Just one other quick comment to interject here, and my council bros can call me on this if I'm in error, but it's not any specific individual council member's champion point, but I think that all of us have kind of taken a real interest in faction warfare generally, and the Eve Dust and future Eve Legion link, and kind of trying to make sure that when we're talking about Dust and when we're talking about the future for Legion and just the community in general, that it really is a more integrated New Eden community, and is a lot more robust than just an FPS and a New Eden skin. That this game, regardless of if you're saying Dust or Legion, offers something unique to the players who are part of it. And that's something that, even though it's not a single council members thing, I really think shouldn't be overlooked as far as something that we're neck deep in already and trying to make sure we're engaging CCP on.
Yep, I agree, and I think that Soraya made a really good point of. I don't know if he was the first one to present the quote that I'm going to tell you here, but essentially he said, Dust without the Eve link, or sorry, Legion without an Eve link is essentially just going to be another shooter in a wave of shooters. And I really like that, because I think it's very true, and I think that's important to remember that that Eve link is going to be that crucial because of that fact. And I think that needs to be
that was me, though. I think I just agreed.
Wasn't that you?
I don't know.
Oh, dang it. Well, I'm misspoken here, but yeah, that point is really poignant, and it's something that has affected me, because I had never heard it, eloquently said in such, short verbiage or what have you. But
no, I think that's, I probably misspoke when I called out Sir Manboy on that after you teed that up, Zatara. It's literally, I acknowledge that good ideas will generally be supported probably by the bulk of the council, I suspect, and by the bulk of the player base. It's definitely no one individual that's leading the charge on it, but I was probably oversimplifying when I said that. But I know for me, just when I hear you guys talking about wanting to take that forward as something to do in faction warfare, or I assume that's where it's at, then that's something I've wanted. It would make it a whole lot easier to do things. It really, fosters. I think it really fosters and incentivizes the corp and alliance structure when you do that. I know because there's always the thought that it's like, hey, you don't want to, pub stomp people with like QSync or with like a team deploy function. I don't know if anybody's played faction warfare I don't know, like since ever, but it in my mind, I think it would actually lend you to defending yourself more because you're more apt to like actively seek to get people on your team that you've worked with before. So just a thought. But with that, what I'd like to do, guys, is kind of hop over to the Hotfix Charlie Jazz. We did see what looks to be the final list of numbers and topics that laid out for Hotfix Charlie, and there was a few of them that kind of surprised me in terms of because I wasn't able to keep up on all the. I like how he uses individual threads for the different kind of subtopics of the hotfix, and it did make it a little bit hard to keep them all kind of in my hand, where I could kind of look through them all. So I actually missed a couple of them. I didn't even realize they were being talked about. But I think what it also does is probably gives him a really focused way of getting feedback on very specific elements that he wants to address in the hotfix process. So with that, what I'll do is I'll pull up kind of the hotfix general topic list, and then kind of like just quickly work my way down them. And if you guys want to chime in while I'm reading them, or we can get all through them, it doesn't matter. But I think it'll be. I think it's a pretty neat looking list right now. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but it's probably okay. Because I doubt you're going to have a single player out there that'll agree with everything in there. All right, so the first thing I noticed is a lot of changes to turrets. Now, we've talked about that here on the show quite a bit, but
buff
it's
turrets.
It's a massive buff to turrets.
I am Groot.
Yeah, that was apparently planned without my knowledge. It is important, by the way, that we specify that turrets are the guns that are on tanks and installations. But when specifically speaking of the stationary objects, those are installations, because they actually, I guess, one of the are we making that? Is it that the turrets are becoming more alike each other or something between vehicles and installations or something?
No, I don't. Well,
I can't remember.
This is actually Pokey. You could probably help us out. I'll read it to you, and I do not know if this is how they've made the halves, but it says large blaster turret dispersion decay at max dispersion has been increased, increasing the rate of accuracy recovery at higher dispersion levels. That's a lot of interesting words that I'm not entirely sure I know what they mean in terms of actual gameplay. And I'm very curious if anybody does know, by the way.
Well, this is where the Black Jackal would have been so useful, because he actually works with Unreal 3. It would actually explain all these numbers to us. Well, actually, the names of them.
Pokey, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
The way I'm reading it is basically the dispersion, like the maximum spread that the turret can get has been increased, but when it reaches those high levels of dispersion, it's going to recover and shrink down a lot faster than it currently is. Because right now, once you get that dispersion up, it takes forever to actually get back down to reasonable levels. So I think they're making it so you can't have sustained fire, but you can actually get back to a more reasonable accuracy quicker. So it encourages burst firing opposed to long sustained shots and waiting forever to actually come back. So I think that's good. It's going to make it more of a suppression weapon and not so much a shoot 5 bullets then wait for 20 seconds to actually be able to hit anything again. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, here's my one question. When you mentioned that, like, have they clarified whether so when they mentioned like the max decay has been increased, have they stretched out the time to that so that the decay that increase of decay is added on to the time that it already takes, or will essentially the length of time that it takes to get to that max decay new level the same amount of time that it used to get to the old one? Does that make sense?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer.
Because if they increased it, then if they increased the time to allow the essentially, then it's just you could only get the same dispersion level if you essentially went to the same time that it took to get to that old dispersion level. But if you didn't increase the time and you just basically had the same time length and adapted it so that you get to a higher dispersion in the same amount of time that it takes to get to max dispersion currently, then you're going to have more dispersion in essentially the same time as this patch, which is bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I get what you're saying. I think that's a good question. You should.
Man, it's a lot of words in there. You know what I mean?
I get what
that
you're
can
saying,
be convoluted.
Yeah, you should definitely ask them though, because that's a real good question to find out. Basically, saying is that the time to reach max dispersion the same, or has it been increased with the increased spread?
Well,
so
I did pull up the spreadsheet, and I truly hate spreadsheets, like with a distinct passion. That's why I don't mind or doing that shit in Eve. But I can read you the numbers. It says decay at max. And this is the current, by the way, pre Charlie. Decay at max is 0.8. Decay at min is 0.3. I don't know what that number means, but when you look at the highlighted numbers where it says proposed decay at max 2.5 and proposed decay at min 0.3, what that tells me is whatever the decay at max is, they are like by a factor of like about 125, 150% changing it, whatever that is.
Yeah. The question is just how long it takes to get to that decay. Because if they just stretched it out and the same amount of time, then you're actually gonna be way worse off than essentially it will be, like Pokey said, it'll be a burst fire weapon and be efficient. If they did not increase, if they did increase the time essentially to achieve that decay, and it also means that decay is going to be implemented more slowly over time, whereas you just essentially got to the max decay after whatever period of time, then you were essentially at that decay proportional for however long you held the button until you had to reload. In this sense, like it could be a major nerf if it gets up to that like huge increase of decay over the same amount of time that it takes to get to decay right now, max decay right now. Okay. So that's a really important question to ask, and I think I didn't even realize that it needed to be asked. I didn't know if it had already been answered somewhere, but I'll go figure that out.
And to Soraya's point earlier, I'm reading the turret section, so my big assumption is that it's turrets on installations and turrets on vehicles. It also notes that turrets will no longer slow their target's movement speed when hit. So I guess the stun locking effect, which I know CCP really doesn't like, people using that term, but it looks like that's going to be addressed, because if you get hit by one of those large blaster rounds, if they're lucky enough to hit you right now, by the way, it will definitely slow your ability to recover and get out of there. But let's see. What I find interesting as I look in the turret things is they did touch that whatever that massive shift is in the large blasters, but small blasters clearly are getting a buff, or at least they're making them much more practical in terms of smaller dispersion growth, smaller maximum minimum dispersion. So it's a much more looks like a much more accurate weapon. Looks like they're adjusting it where you have higher dispersion decay and lower dispersion when you're aiming down sights, which is a pretty good positive. It is increasing the heat buildup, which is probably pretty legit to give it more of a burst fire sort of aspect to control the heat. But it's also increasing the damage, fairly significantly from 38 per round to 44. So at a minimum, it's kind of up there at least with a solid plasma rifle, which is probably about where it needs to be. And I think this is actually going to make small blasters quite useful. At least just reading the words on the paper here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a serious problem when the small railgun, which is supposed to be more of an AV weapon, is clearly the best infantry killer. I think that's a big issue. I mean, I experienced that just a couple hours ago playing, where this guy was tearing people apart with the small rails. And I mean, anyone who's tried a small blaster can tell you they can't hit shit. I mean, they're terrible. So I'm really looking forward to see that change. I actually probably like to see a decrease in the fire rate to the rail as well, but that can come at a later time.
Yeah, I'm glad for the changes, because I took the new blasters out for a spin when they got last touched, and they were like not hitting anything at almost point blank.
Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, dude.
Basically.
I had a PC match last week where I was trying to use a large blaster on infantry for the first time. I was like, well, look, this is a waste of time. Like every once in a while, a shot would hit them, but they would regenerate health back, and it was more or less pointless. I mean, I could even use it as a suppression weapon, which is just bad.
Dude, and I can use a large blaster tank and hit for the first 3 shots, and then sort of let it off, and then re-queue it up. But dude, small blasters on an ADS. Oh my gosh, dude. You can't hit anything with those things. It felt so pathetic, and it was embarrassing because they feel so freaking powerful. I've said this since they added the new thing, like the new sights to them. They feel like uber powerful, but you can't hit anything with them. So that's the hope is that at least like after this patch, as long as they can hit something, it sounds like they'll be really, really powerful. But that whole problem this whole time with small blasters has just been really frustrating for me.
Well, while we're on the topic, kind of just a thought for you guys. There's been a lot of talk recently on the forums about kind of introducing variants using the same art assets, kind of a Type 2 sort of thing, for different vehicles, like having a Type 2 Gunlaji that has different slots set up, or to emulate a Minmatar tank. But another thought that's been kind of rolling around is taking existing turrets and making variants that behave differently. So, for example, like a blaster that behaves more like an HMG with a cone that tightens over time, opposed to the dispersion we got right now. I just kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on. Again, there's probably technical issues, but just trying to kind of emulate different turret types to match racial variants that we currently don't have using existing assets, and just kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on that.
Well, potential tech issues aside, there's actually been some discussion going on about doing that via the loyalty point stores, as potentially those are filled up so that we can key all the different new varieties, essentially as you described them, the statted differences to each race, because then you already have a theme to go with on it.
That's good to hear, because there's a lot of desire for racial vehicles and turrets and whatnot, and it may not look the part, but I think it can certainly behave the part. Especially when you have existing behaviors in the game, like the HMG, you can, I'm assuming, emulate that behavior with a turret as well.
I do think there's some dislike of the concept of having a quote-unquote racial variant that doesn't match appearance for that race, because it's hacky. And as much as it is nice to look at it from the gameplay side only, from an appearance side, I don't know if it's a ideal type of thing, and I don't know if it's something that.
I mean, I have to say, like the average Joe player, if you told me I could get a new widget that behaved differently, whether it was in an old skin or not, I would really prefer the new widget. Or if your other option is to get nothing because they don't have the resources to put against it.
That depends.
You know what I mean?
What if the player can't tell the difference between a missile turret and some laser blaster tank gun thing, because they don't have a new asset for it? So you don't know what you're going to get when you see something rolling up on you.
Behaviorally, it has to be very similar enough in order to keep the so-called advertising well positioned for other players to actually observe that, hey, it's a blaster turret, it's going to shoot a lot of bullets at me, at least, regardless of what variety it is.
Yeah, I mean, one thought that I was throwing around was the idea of having a blaster turret that fired more like a shotgun, where it was much shorter range, but not like a rapid fire sort of thing that we have now, but more of just a single burst of high damage at close range. And the behavior is the same, that if you see something that looks like a blaster turret, it's going to screw you up at close range. I think that that's. I would totally agree with you, Zal, if we were still in a development phase where we could actually introduce new assets. But the fact of the matter is that we can't. But I still think there's a lot of stuff that can be done, and you can still get variants that make sense. And if you don't want to call it an Amar turret, you just want to call it a Type 2 or a burst something, or if you want to call it something that actually matches the racial theme but still behaves like you would expect that other racial weapon to work, I think people would still like that. It's just they want the variants. I mean, I personally would love to have a a tank with 1 high slot and 4 low slots. I think that'd be awesome, because that would be like an Amar tank. I don't care if you call it Amar. I don't care if you paint it gold or pink or whatever. The fact is that I'd like to have that option, because that's something I've looked forward to for quite a while. And so, aesthetics aside, I think it's important to gameplay that we kind of push that sort of thing forward for the players, because I mean, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of people want stuff like that.
Yeah, that's my read from the community. I mean, and obviously my knowledge isn't omnipresent or comprehensive. No one's is. But while clearly not having new art assets isn't ideal, and not being able to do everything from the ground up isn't ideal, there's a definite preference in all of the feedback I've been seeing and getting directed to me for getting new content, new play content into the game, even if it requires a little bit of workaround in the current development environment.
Because I mean, people like the rebalancing and the hotfix. That's great. But if you really want to energize the community and make them feel like the game isn't dead, you give them something that's new within the limitations of what you can do development, in terms of development. But if you give them something new with some variant, that's going to go a long way in helping morale. I think that's something you should really push for.
Okay. Cool.
Also, it's been one of those things that's been missing from vehicle gameplay is the ability to choose from different types of game styles, because we used to have vehicle turns, but not anymore.
Wait, can you clarify? You said vehicle.
We used to have different various kinds of vehicle turrets, such as the compressed railgun and the scatter blaster.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's really true. When did they take that out? Because the scatter blaster, I swear, was here in like 1.4, right?
They took them out and they rebalanced.
Okay, it was 1.7. Okay, so I'm not going crazy here. Yeah, because I didn't take vehicle much before 1.8 at all, and even except for just taking an ADS to the city for PCs, But yeah, you're right. Like I had forgotten about all of those things, and that's low hanging fruit stuff, because the stuff is still there. They haven't thrown those assets away. Like scatter blasters, if you gave them a super huge RPM and then just made it so that it overheats like really hard, like you could totally make that into like a shotgun type thing that basically just shot out forward, but you got that 1 shot or 2 shots and that's it, and you could do a boatload of damage. But those types of things are super, super relevant. And I think that's really important to bring to the conversation, like, because if it is something that the players want and it's something that the devs are capable of putting back in, like, it should happen. It should happen. I agree.
Okay. Well, let's kind of bounce forward. Since we just kind of talked through the turrets, I would like to skip down the list to installations real quick. Massive buff to installations in terms of EHP. Couple other areas that they touched up on. Let's see. Okay, yeah, big EHP buff.
Well, can we talk about that for just a sec?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I mean, have any of you played Final Fantasy 14?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
So do you guys remember on I don't remember, man. I haven't played it since the last like the first month that it came out, but because I was just grinding it, and then they wouldn't let me play with PSN money. I had to go onto Square Enix, and I wasn't going to pay with anything but PSN money. So I stopped playing. But suffice it to say, the level fit, like the final run of the game, had like two parts, I want to say. And the first part that you had to go do, you could grind over and over for tomes. And at the end of it, like the final boss, you had to like go up to these cannons and stuff, and then shoot at the lady boss. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You had to like go and take the ammo, and it would go and fill up the cannons. Dude, like that whole concept has just been repeated to me over and over in other games where, like, not exactly that way. I'm using it as a, definitely a loose example, but there's been a ton of games where I've had where, certain things happen where you need to go outside and use this stationary turret or something like that in order to take down a problem. And that's the way that I've envisioned, turrets in Dust, for at least for PC purposes, for a long freaking time. These types of things where, oh crap, hey dude, there's a freaking ADS over the city, or hey dude, there's a tank right there. It's time to go out and go hit the turret up and go take care of it. Because not always are you, capable of just dropping what you're doing and going all the way over to a supply depot in the city. And not always are you capable of having a ton of guys who can, AV down, keep on AV the entire time. Now, thankfully, it's a bit more easy with commando suits. But it's just not plausible when in PC oftentimes, and so that's why you've had certain things where people have to set up forges on high towers and stuff, and that sort of gameplay became prominent because of the fact that you had to have players there to counter to play AV. And so Anyway, the point being that the huge installation HP buff is going to be a huge game changer for PC, because those rail turrets will actually are plausibly capable of staying throughout an entire PC match. If a tank goes to go take them down, another tank is going to be able to find them unawares, because it's going to take a long freaking time for the tank to feasibly take down the rail turret, or any of the turrets. And so this all like is super emergent gameplay in a small sliver of little New Eden here in PC, because there's just a ton of other strategies and things that are going to come into play that were never capable of coming into play before.
Yeah, no, totally with you on that. Let me make a real quick rundown of all the changes to turrets. I'll be really quick. That'll give you time to fend off the dog that's whipping your ass right now. Let's see.
Do you guys see my puppies?
So the armor and shields have basically been increased. Gosh, it looks like
installation
threefold.
buffs, not turret buffs.
I'm sorry.
It's important to specify that.
Yeah, I know. When you read the thing is, when you read the patch notes, it'll say installations, then it says turret, armor, and shield. So it refers to them as turrets in the text under installation. So it can get a little confusing. So installations, specifically about the offensive one, the turrets, it looks like about a threefold increase in EHP. They now have a passive armor repair, which is pretty significant actually. 5 HP for turrets, CRUs 20 HP per second, supply depots 30 HP per second. That means those things aren't going away. Holy shit. Missile launcher installations range reduced from 2,000 meters to 250, which is basically the same as on your missile tanks, which that's probably legit. Turrets will no longer automatically shoot at any infantry that move near them. Hold that thought. I'm gonna circle back on that one in a minute. Turret detection range against all vehicles reduced to 75. Okay. Turrets can now detect targets in any direction. Okay. And turrets will now lose targets that move out of line of sight after 3 seconds. And it says, note, they still return fire anytime anybody shoots at them, including infantry. So what it looks like is they can see you in 360 degrees out to a certain, I guess, range. But when it says turrets no longer automatically shoot at any infantry, will they ever shoot at infantry if you don't shoot at them?
The AI will still shoot back at whoever shoots it first. They will not automatically engage them, though.
And it used to be like that a while back. Infantry could generally come right up to turrets.
In other words, don't piss off the vehicle.
The only issue with this is that here's the one thing is that essentially, unless if you hack a turret for your side, the only benefit of it is if you're using it, because the likelihood, at least, the likelihood of someone shooting a turret on purpose is going to be essentially limited to stupidity, right?
No,
like no one's
or accidents or any engagement in the area. It's
or trying to take it down.
Vehicles and
no. Well, I'll tell you what's going to
damage.
happen. The first time some dude throws a forge gun round on it or a missile, like a swarm, it's going to tee off on them, that's probably legit.
Right, they're not going to do that arbitrarily. They're only going to do that if they're trying to take it down, right? Or because why else would you shoot at it? Like that would be the only purpose, right? Whereas before it was so feasibly, unless someone's trying to take it down, the fact that it's not on your side is not beneficial unless someone's manning it.
Well, actually, Zatara, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know what I do now is I will shoot at a turret to get it to look at me, because I know it's not going to shoot me because I'm blue. Because remember, it'll slew the turret. It'll slew the turret.
Yeah, it's the fastest time to turret. Yeah.
That's right. So it'll slew it over, and then it'll start shooting at the red that's on the other side of the box from me. So I've done that many times, and I'm kind of curious if it will differentiate, or if it'll just say, I took fire from 3 o'clock, and then track over any reds in 3 o'clock, it'll start hammering, which I still think that's a beautiful mechanic. The other thing this tells me is for all the little cloaky scout shotgunny dudes that I scream and cuss about when I go and I have to go to push to talk on my comms, this means that turrets now are going to be great hunting grounds for you, because you'll wait for some dude to run over there and flip that turret, and you'll just hammer them.
Well, another thing I'm really glad to see is the passive armor regen. It's something I've wanted to see for a long time, because what it means is that if you start to take a turret down, and are forced to leave, it's going to rep itself back up eventually. And this is particularly important, I think, for resupply depots, which already take quite a bit of a beating before they go down. And if they're going to be buffing that a lot higher, it's going to be near impossible to kill those things because you have to sit there for so long. And if you disengage, it's going to be coming back at like what, 30 HP a second, I think it was.
It's just not going to be worth trying to kill those things now.
Well, I don't know about that because are the supply depots and CRUs? They're not getting a buff to EHP, right?
Not that I can tell. No, I think it's
Yeah,
just the turret.
if you're sustainably firing at it, like 30 a second when you're doing over 1,000 a shot is not going to be, a huge deal, but it isn't going to matter if you have to back off over and over.
Yeah, that's my point. Is it if you leave early, you're going to have to come back and kind of undo a lot of the repping it's done.
There has been a lot of times where like a supply depot's gotten heavily damaged, and then you're killing the turret, and then one of your teammates hacks it before you completely kill it. Now that'll come back up. That's one of the cases I see a really big change there, because I've seen a lot of times where you're shooting it, you've got it very low health, and then your team hacks it, and your team is using it, but then it gets destroyed by the other side really quick.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
How efficacious is that really going to be in a battle, the fact that they have this repper? Like, if you feasibly got it, like, even half EHP, right? Like, how much EHP is that missing? It's what, 15 or 20k total EHP that they currently have?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge.
So
I don't
that
think
30
it's a huge
that 30 a
rep
sec is going to be, it's not anything, and that's one thing. And I'm just using that to segue into a different point. Like, if one of the things that I've complained about and that I will probably bring up as a low hanging fruit for a hotfix, if it's worth it to do it, which I think it is that reppers repping a supply depot are not efficacious. They're just not worth it. Because I've had times where I've sat 3 people on a supply depot trying to keep it in an ambush from a tank killing it, and it doesn't matter. Even with 3 reppers, it just doesn't heal enough for it to be worth it. And I just think that's crazy. Like, I think it's really, really sad and pathetic, and I don't see that this is going to be a huge deterrent as far as like over time bringing it back. I don't think that it's necessarily strong enough to do its job, because the amount of time that it's going to take by itself at 30 a second it's astronomical, right? That's like 5 or 10 minutes, which for the most part is I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think it's meant to be a deterrent to the behavior. If you're going to destroy it, you're going to destroy it. I think the big thing is if you do leave, that it starts to recover. And
do you feel like it should be a percentage then?
No, it'd be too much.
No, it should never be a percentage.
No, I mean, it might be a little low, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm a big fan of iterative fixes myself. I would rather implement a new change and it be a little bit underpowered than it make things indestructible. And if we need to nudge it up further, I would certainly support doing that after we see what this
So what
does.
would be like, just as like a concept?
Did we just lose him?
Yep, kind of dropped out there, Z.
He used all the bandwidth he had tonight. I'm sorry. This is how it works. I will say this, though. If you think about all these installations having 0 passive reps now, you actually do have to make a conscious decision to kill these, other than turrets, by the way. Like with the CRUs and the supply depots, you really do. You don't accidentally kill those. You can like drive by a turret and kill that thing by, like without a second thought. But CRUs and supply depots, that's always been a conscious decision to kill that thing. And that also means that you're making a decision that you're safe enough that you can spend the amount of time, even with a large railgun, shooting that thing to do that. But with the passive reps, I think it's when you shoot it or you suppress it for a while, you almost got it killed. Yeah, no problem, brother. So when you're shooting it, but it's when you get engaged by another tank and then you get busy and you start messing around with those targets and somebody says, hey, come to Bravo, and you got to pull off the depot and you can't kill it. And by the time you come back to that depot, it's probably worked its way back up. So it's clearly not designed as a zombie installation. I don't think anybody's thinking that. But like I said, opposed to the 0 that it has now, that's not insignificant. The one thing this did strike me is that if you are redlined, your turrets in the red line are much more useful in terms of trying to get you a breakout now. because a lot of times those, the railguns or the blasters or something like that in your red line that around your home base, your ground spawn usually, that generally are just warpoint candy. Those things actually might be useful now to people in the red line trying to break out of the red line, or at least not getting turned into chum. By the way, there's my Shark Week reference for the show.
Nice.
So that, I mean, just throwing it out there, but that might be a small thing, but it's probably, if you're on the end of a getting redlined, having a blaster or a large rail that you can use to swat at people as your guys are trying to, infiltrate out of the red line, that's probably not a bad thing either.
And I am just so excited about the buff to turret HP, and them no longer being cheap and quick warpoint candy.
Warpoint candy. Yep.
It's just, I'm so thrilled about it. It's my happiest change of like the last.
But
6
speaking
months.
of Warpoint candy and the new Warbarge, that's one of the things that's changed, right? Yeah, the new Warpoint system or the total number of Warpoints required to call in an OB, like that's huge. Or Warbarge, right? Yeah.
That's going to make it much more challenging to pull a solo, which will be that'll be my new fun marker now.
Yeah, that'll be really, really tough. Like, there's only a handful of Logis, I assume, or I don't know. I guess if you're just like playing tank against a boatload of other tanks, you might be able to pull it out. But
maybe
solo OBs will be really, really tough. And this is also an indirect buff to, in a way, to people in PC who bring their own OB support because orbital strike, deployments and stuff. Because the number of war barges now that I assume are going to go in a PC match is going to be halved, right? Essentially.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, and the big thing, I think it might be a little too high of a number where it is, but I think we'll have to see.
I don't know. What is it, like 800, 850 per player if you get a full squad? That's not bad.
I think it just depends on what you're looking for, how many strikes you want, you expect the squad to be able to call in per match.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
Really that's really the purpose here that we're gauging is how many strikes do you feasibly want a squad to be pulling? Because if you're talking like some squads pull in 20K and it's no big deal, but for the most part of Dust, I don't think that per match. I don't think that probably only one squad is going to be able to pull in 5K war points on the average match. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I mean, like every match I see, I think there's only 5 or 6 people who get over 1,000 war points.
That's my thought. I think you'll probably see mostly one war barge strike per match from each side, and on rare occasion you'll see 2 or 3. Now, whether or not I can certainly see the benefits of that. It puts a lot more reliance on the gunplay. You won't see those sorts of awful things where you do effectively use you dodge a warbarge strike or whatever. You come back in, you try and get back to your point you're defending, and then they drop another one. That'll be done. You'll never see that again. Well,
and it's also going to be a deterrent to people. I mean, it's not a deterrent, but it's just going to minimize the effects of, if you think about it, like when you go into ambush matches, I'll take a full squad in and we put an order down and then people rep the squad lead, when the war barge goes down. And man, we can farm another 800 or 1,000 war points on the spot just from that. And so you're essentially lowering the war point cap when you've got a smart squad that's doing things. When they deployed the actual war barge itself. So I think that it's going to snowball a little bit and minimize the effects of that. And it's going to be really interesting to see the way that it plays out and the way that it affects, especially pub matches.
Well,
it's going to create party tanks being supreme in a lot of ways. Drop a defend order on a multi-turreted tank and go to town. You can still earn multi-OBs that way just based on the numeric totals. It's going to happen.
Well, and I don't know if that's sort of interesting. That's really true, actually. I wonder if that's a beneficial thing because you're going to get more like more 3-person tanks. What do you guys think of that? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Party tanks are ridiculous. You can get insane amounts of war points with very minimal effort because you get the multiple stacking of the commissions and the bonuses and the added percentage.
Well,
It's
anything
insane.
that I would love to encourage that. I think solo tanking is a blight and a plague upon this game. So
I'm just there thinking through this, listening to you guys, and it does two things. Just broadly, again, is what I'm seeing is that is now further incentivizing. You better find 6 dudes to be in your squad. That's number one.
Yep.
So number two, if I were going to run like the average, like a daily squad setup, I would have one party tank, and then and everybody that jumps out of that party tank would be heavies that can self-rep. And then the other 3 guys would probably be a mix. It'd be just a Logi heavy scout team that I could just drop on a point and hold it. But then now you have in that party tank, not only you're going to accrue war points, but I watched Dark Legion do this the other day. They rolled 3 or 4 tanks, and everybody in the tank that got out was all but like 1 or 2 guys they were heavies. So they'd roll up to a point with 2 or 3 tanks, and then they would teleport fucking 6 HMGs right in front of your face, and then blast you, hack the point, hop back in, and then they just rolled that, like Blitzkrieg style. Off the top of my head, if I'm running a single squad, like just FAC War or Pubs or something, yeah, I'm running 1 party tank, a Logi heavy scout combo, and you're probably going to be hard to be beat right there.
You can also throw an ADS into the mix for your second squad.
Absolutely.
ADS with a Minmatar scout, hack everything.
No, well, I think when you add that war point change and then you add the installation change, I think Zatara called it, you're looking at like a rapidly changing gameplay in Dust in terms of it's going to change the meta dramatically. I think give it about a week. Once it hits, people are going to adjust, and it will definitely change play styles.
And I'm always a fan of things that discourage solo play. I see people complaining about, it's too hard to fight against full squads, and it's like, well, then don't squad alone. It's a team-based game. You shouldn't be playing solo at all anyways.
So,
God, I hate that, though, because one of my problems is that if I bring in a full squad of FA against you, it's not pretty. And I'm not bragging at all. I just mean like versus the average team, and I'm not saying to you specifically. I have to go out in squads of 3. If I go out with squads of 4 more, it's a red line in skirmish. Even if it has to be 2 squads on the other team. And then that's basically the problem with matchmaking is that you either, if I go into one where there is 2 squads on the other time, then we get raped. And if it's not, most of the time it's just 1 squad on the other team. And if I bring in a full squad, it's a red line.
Well, I think a worthy goal is to encourage people to get out of NPC Corps and encourage them to squad up more. I think people who are NPC Corps and refuse to run as a group, I think that's not good because it does cause situations like you're talking about where they get redlined, and that's not fun for anyone. It's boring as shit for you guys. It's terrible for them. And I think when you've got more balanced teams, it's a hell of a lot better.
Hey, we did bring up that idea. I don't know whose idea it was, but I've mentioned it in a few places. But it's the idea to dump people into I forgot about this. This was one of the ideas that we came in with. I don't remember who presented either, but we actually met and told CCP Ratati about the idea of just dumping people from NPC Corps into a recruit channel at the beginning of their game so they could get hooked up to other players. You know what I mean? Instead of just being in the academy and tra-la-lol and only have their local and respective NPC Corp chat.
Yeah, that's pretty legit.
But yeah, not to change in here. But I agree with you, Pokey. It's you're right. Obviously, like we definitely don't want NPC players who are not squatting up. We want to incentivize it, and I just think what I'm mentioning is just a problem of matchmaking specifically for me. But overall concept, yeah, you definitely want as many squads playing together as possible.
No, I'm totally down with that. Just kind of in the interest of time, I want to push through a couple of the other topics. I did want to touch on something that's kind of near and dear to Soraya's heart, is vehicles and AV. There's some changes to the Swarm launcher, which I think a lot of people expected a change to the Swarm launcher. I'm not entirely sure this is the change they expected. So basically, it looks like all 3 tiers will fire 4 missiles instead of basically tying the damage to a flat rate per missile than increasing the number of missiles per volley. Everything fires 4 missiles now, and then they just increase basically the warhead, the damage for the warhead by tier. The net effect is at the proto level, you actually do, I want to say about 48 or 50 damage less per volley.
Which is crap.
Yeah,
Anyway,
which is
going.
crazy. No. What they also did is they increased the base ammo number, which I'm not really sure I heard anybody crying out that they were running out of swarm ammo. But frankly, you can't lock and fire fast enough to go through your ammo allotment. That's even if you haven't even put SP against it. So
you do run out because this only got a reserve of like 8 or something like that. You know what I mean? So you do run out after a few. I think it's like 3 or 4 full clips that you get, which compared to others, I think you get 5 or 6, like on a rifle or something like that.
Yeah, sure, but if you're not carrying a hive, if you're running AV and you're not carrying a hive, that sounds like a you problem, not a game problem.
Well, it depends, because if you throw a hive down and you're sitting stationary while you're, and you're trying to do your job, like especially in PC, you're just asking to get viewed at. You know what I mean? So if I run a hive, I actually blow up. Like I'll blow up hives in PC and stuff like that because of that. Because you don't want to get viewed where, because most of the time when you're playing PC AV, you're up somewhere high so that you get as cover as much as possible, because like I said, you can't just go to an installation or something and still do your job, or you can't go to a supply depot and go and be effective and then swap out very often.
But I definitely, you definitely can run out of swarm ammo, but it's not the top issue.
It's not at all.
And I mean, yeah, the nerfing protoswarms, I think it needs a buff, if anything. But the big thing that it did do, which is at least a step in the right direction, is that it should be heavily buffing militia and advanced to the point that they're relevantly useful, or at least as relevantly useful as the protoswarm is, which is to say still not much. But the big thing is that previously militia and advanced swarms weren't even worth mentioning as a threat. And so they've brought those up a fair bit.
Sorry, go ahead, finish, Soraya.
I mean, personally, I'm going to have to see a lot of the Charlie changes overall in practice before I can say a whole lot. But I still think that I would like to see more love for swarm launchers. I would love an excuse to use them again. I still feel my personal inclination is that swarms are in every single way imaginable completely inferior to forge guns, and I can't imagine why anybody would fit a swarm launcher if they can fit a forge gun. But that's just me.
Dude, this for me is a prime example of why you balance the meta from PC and not pubs, because there is a direct, I think that this is truly a change, that the net nerf at proto level and not a buff, at least like to proto swarms, is directly because this was bounced off of pub numbers. If they saw the way that PC meta handles AV and how useless swarms are, not to even speak of plasma cannons, they would have understood, that this was going to be not efficacious at making proto swarms more useful. And the thing is that even when we spoke about it, one of the things that seemed to be characterizing the conversation on the forums is that it was essentially, well, usually there's a lot of swarms out. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, in pubs there's usually, a lot of people tend to bring out swarms, and so the number of swarm kills versus dropships was fine, and all of these kinds of things. But the problem is that you need to be able to take them down faster. And I love the change to the number of missiles, because you don't have to hit more missiles. I think it used to be 6 at proto level you had to hit.
That's right, 6.
So now you have to hit with less missiles, but it needs to be a buff overall to DPS. And I'm really glad that they shelved the idea to buff ADS EHP, because I think we've all come to the conclusion, at least on this.
Are you sure about that? Because I'm looking at the notes. That's not what it says.
Wait, did they not change that?
Here's what I'm tracking. So I've lowered the damage per volley on proto swarms, and I've increased the shield on Caldari dropships by 500. So you take the least effective weapon, like the inverse of weapon versus shield, and I give you more HP of that, which has a higher resist against the explosive damage. So I don't know if that makes your effective HP, but it's going to be higher than 500. And they didn't need 500, by the way. Like, when I say I can use swarms, I can kill any tank on the field. It takes me a minute usually. But there's not a tank I'm worried about anywhere on the field. I don't care who's rolling in it. But ADSs, yeah. There's nothing a swarm's going to do against an ADS, particularly anybody that knows anything like what they're doing. So what this tells me is that anybody not flying a shield tanked dropship will be soon, and my swarms are going to be less effective against those. If they wanted to change swarms, they needed to change the missile velocity, like the flight speed, or maybe diddle with your lock-on time, because that's what really.
It needs to be flight speed. It needs to be velocity of the missile, or it needs to be base DPS, like overall just a base DPS jump.
DPS, like, well, let me this way, they don't really work on DPS; they work on alpha damage. So, like, I'm actually okay. Like, they could have actually made these changes for whatever reason, can't cook these numbers however they wanted in terms of like the alpha damage per volley strike. I'm actually really okay with that. What I'm concerned about is the ability for the pilot to do two things. One, outrun my swarms when he's at at full afterburner, and he's outrunning my swarms. That's a problem. And then two, the lock range, actually, like, they could extend the lock range a little bit, not a lot, but like say out to 200 meters, not like 175, and then increase my missile velocity. And I think what you'd find is, even at the current damage level per tier, like even the proposed one, which is slightly less, you're going to be significantly more effective against dropships. You may not kill them, but you will certainly worry them to the point where they have to leave, and they're a lot less effective than they normally are.
Well, and regardless of how they do it, the main purpose should be that one of the things that for me is just frustrating is that if I fire, if I see a dropship, I completely get the drop on him. He's turned in the opposite direction, and he's extremely close to me. Like, I'm talking like 40 or 50 meters away, looking somewhere else. I can fire off 2 full shots and be firing off the third. The first will hit, and before the second has even made contact, he's whizzing away. And there's just nothing. I don't think that swarm should be relegated to as a deterrent. It needs to be able to have enough force that if I catch you off guard, you can't always every time just afterburner and then hold up or hold the forward button and always zoom away. Like, that's just problematic to me, especially because forges are just de facto because they have the range and they have the alpha damage to pursue, and swarms just don't.
Well, the other thing is the round coming out of the forge gun, you can't outrun it. That's the big thing for me. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Well, you can't necessarily outrun swarms either unless you can find a convenient building.
That's not true.
No, you can't.
That's absolutely not true. You can afterburn straight up and get away from them.
All you have to do is hold right on both sticks on your dropship once you afterburner up, and it does a maneuver where essentially you pull.
Oh, well,
he's gone.
Trust me, whatever he was going to say was right.
Sorry, okay. But essentially it's called Judge calls it the Judge maneuver on his YouTube channel, but people have been doing this since forever. But the purpose of it is essentially once you afterburner up and you hold right the analog sticks, both of them to the right, if you've got enough momentum, which comes automatically from the afterburner, you essentially flip your dropship around so that the nose of it is facing the swarms, and the swarms blow up in front of your dropship and do not hurt you.
That's
not only that, but it does reduce damage because it's hitting that portion of the dropship and not your underbelly.
That sounds broken.
No, it's a move. It's a technique. Yeah. It takes skill to do it, at least a portion skill, and it's emergent gameplay also. It's not super difficult. I'll tell you, it's not super difficult, especially on a militia dropship. It's very easy because the turn differences, if you know what I'm talking about. But But yeah, it's not super difficult to do. It's just a maneuver that you have to learn, and once you figure it out, you'll do it every time when a swarm goes for you, and it just mitigates the damage.
Well, I mean, I've had my debates, with.
I'm gonna link you that video
from the ground side versus the air side, and I see certainly some of both sides of things, but I do feel that no matter how much I think that I should have something dead to rights with a swarm launcher, I dropship always seems to be able to book out of my lock range before
Always.
they're even into armor. And on top of that, you know, I use a forge gun now because I don't have range problems, and I don't have can I arc this around a building if he's moving, but you know, and gets behind something before I get there. I fire that forge, it's gonna hit him. I can charge up my forge gun while behind cover. I don't have to stand out, you know, in view of the vehicle to do a lock. The damage is higher on a forge gun in general. I just don't even see why people would fit a swarm as they are now. And
because they want to be able to move like it more than a slow mosey.
Yeah, so you take a forge gun, you throw some Kincats on it. This is great.
Yeah, let me know how that works for you. The one thing I do want to say before we kind of bounce to a lot of changes to the machine guns. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that one. But one thing I do want to say is like the only part that, well, not the only part, but the thing that actually kind of raised like the tiny red flag for me was the response that I don't remember if it was Logibro or Rattati when people were like, they basically said, "Hey, what's up with these swarm changes?" You know, they were citing the damage reduction in this and the other, and it was like a one-liner response, if I'm not correct. I want to say it was Logibro. He basically said, "Well, that's what the buff to the damage mods were for." Now, that tells me that they have an entirely different thought process about what's going on than what I do. If they think that it's that by buffing the damage mods, that makes that all okay. That like I said, I'm sure he probably didn't mean it that way, but that's I think how it came across in the post. And I would encourage you guys to take a look at that. But that was a little surprising the way he responded to that. Moving on, just a couple of the other big ones. Loyalty points looks like they're getting a triple magnifier, which I think is probably pretty good. I think that's pretty legit. I don't think so either. Well, here's what they need to do.
I think it's a good
ultimately, they either need to lower the cost of stuff, or like I said, dramatically increase it, or change how you rate your standings. Because, like I said, one proto drop suit, a Logi suit, that's still 1100 LP. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I really would like to see. My personal desire would be to figure out about on a winning Fac War match about how many suits someone on average would lose, and kind of target for the winning LP to be somewhere around there, to the point that if you're good, if you're winning, you should be completely sustainable.
The only way that they're going to be able to do that, though, is if they move away from like a flat rate, like a victory fail rate, and then based on your standings. Unless they include something about individual performance, you're going to have a really hard time doing that, just because of the differences in cost of the suits.
Well, and if the differences in cost of the suits is a problem to deal with in itself, but I think there should be a decision point that if you're running proto, your margin is going to be small, and if it's if you get a margin of profit, and if you're running something like a standard suit, and you do well, you should get a very, very high profit.
Well, I guess I agree with you, by the way, and I come at it from, like I said, my viewpoint. So if I go like 7-2, 9-2, and I'm running Logi, and I top the board with 3,700 war points, I would like to be able to at least pay for the 2 suits that I lost. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that in an ideal world, a player who is fairly good at the game, enjoys faction warfare, should desire to play entirely in faction warfare and be able to do that without running out, of funds to buy suits. I would like to honestly see relative, and obviously there's really not a direct ISK to LP value, but I think that
didn't they do that though? I thought Arrow did that specifically. Like he talked about what like
I'm not
compared
sure.
to
He's one of the guys that did that. Yeah.
But
yeah, Arrow did it.
the important point, though, is that it should. I think personally, it should be distinctly more profitable to be winning in FAQ War than just average, even winning or doing really anything in pubs. I think if you're doing
I would agree
well
with
in
that.
FAQ War, it should be better than anything you can do in a pub, so that players who are good at the game have a particular desire to play FAQ War instead of pubs.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Same here.
Wait, am I still here?
Yes.
Okay, there was just some awkward
You're
silence.
alive.
I am Groot.
Oh, well, I should have just told you weren't here anymore.
Oh, I don't know if this has been mentioned, whether I'm completely off topic, but I do hope that in Delta, one of the things that we need to bring back is bring back plasma cannons to the conversation, because as AV, they're just continue to be only pub worthy in certain situations, and they're not PC worthy at all. And one of the things that I might suggest is if the plasma cannon community currently are satisfied with the way that it's working versus infantry, that's fine. But I would almost prefer that it was like a 2-shot to all vehicles, or maybe a 3-shot to all vehicles. Like
2 shots to all vehicles sounds horrifically OP. I'm sorry.
Maybe, but it needs to be alpha as all hell because of the way that like the fact that you have to get so close with it. And the way they should balance that out, maybe at least versus infantry, it shouldn't have any splash at all. It should basically, you should only be trying to use it to hit the broadside of a barn, like a tank or a dropship. And with all of the detraction, like the negatives, the cons to using it, it's got to have alpha as hell, in my opinion, before it's ever going to get used in a competitive environment.
I think I actually use the plasma cannon quite a bit, and I think that in terms of against infantry, it actually performs fairly well. I mean, it takes a pretty good deal of aim to actually hit somebody with it, but when you do, it nukes them, which I think is good because it is difficult to use. As for vehicles, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I just wondered. Like, can you just elaborate on that for just a second? Say, like, do you feel like you win? Do you use it on the commando suit for the most part? Like, yes or
yes.
Okay.
I do.
So, do you feel like in 1v1 situations you have just an equal chance to kill someone who has a rifle, or do you feel like it's like very hit or miss? Like I either nail them or I don't nail them, and that's the end of the engagement.
I basically use it. I usually lead the engagement with the plasma cannon. If I hit them, I win. If I get the splash damage, it's nice. If I miss, I switch to the rifle and finish them off. More often than I'm not hitting them directly, but it does happen, but not consistently. But that's probably a good thing. It happens enough where I feel like it's reasonable.
I gotcha.
Who has the droid? I approve.
My brother. Sorry about that.
Anyway, keep going, Pokey. I just wondered about that. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, it actually hits it hits shield tanks that aren't hardened pretty damn hard. Like it'll probably drop most shield tanks in 2 hits into their armor. Now, once you get into armor, it really struggles. I mean, that's the nature of the damage profile, obviously. So, I mean, it's in terms of actually hitting tanks, they have to fuck up pretty bad for you to actually kill them with it. So, I mean, that's kind of problematic. As for LAVs, though, it's awesome. I love going out into the road and kind of having a bullfight with them and having them try to run me over and then nuking them with the plasma cannon. So in that regard, it's fun. But like you said, for PC, I feel really uncomfortable using it. It doesn't feel nearly as viable as an actual AV weapon as, say, like a Swarm or a Forge does.
Yep.
I am fearful of going back to nerfing it against infantry, just because that's what led us to our current swarms.
Well, what do you mean exactly?
Swarms used to be anti-infantry capable.
Oh no, I think Swarm should definitely remain lock-on only. People are calling for dumbfire missiles, and I said that's what the plasma cannon is for. Don't try to tread into his territory.
Here's the thing, though, and this is my personal view on one of the reasons that Swarms need to be almost to the level that Zatara wants to buff PLCs. I think when you make when you take a weapon, there's how many weapons in the game, and there's only a single weapon in the game that cannot kill infantry, and that's the swarm launcher. And I think if you're going to sacrifice your ability to kill infantry with your main weapon, it should, at the thing that it can kill, which is vehicles, it should be the hands down best way of killing vehicles, period. Because you are massively disadvantaging yourself against infantry to carry one.
Yeah, man. It's not like pubs where you can just, oh hey, I died, let me just swap out because I saw some AV. You just can't do that, man, because the point, like when you're on a 16-man team versus another 16-man team and tactics are involved, it's not feasible for you to, abandon ship because you can't defend that point with a swarm launcher. You're gonna get killed and you're gonna be a liability to that point's defense. And that's the strength of vehicles, is if you can actually force someone to do, force another team to have to pull more AV to counter your dropships, especially in the cities right now. But I mean, point being that forge guns are the only weapon to me in PC that are viable as AV right now, unless you're running a Min Mando with a swarm launcher on towers or Surface Research Lab or on the catwalks on Rings map, because other than that, you're just a liability when you're using swarms. You're just a liability when you're using plasma cannon. Forging, at least I can freaking shoot down the hallway or whatever, and I still can go hard at you, or I can forge splash you and things like that. But and I can alpha you well enough that it's going to be worth it to bring it. But I don't know, man. That's just me.
Okay. Cool. There's two things I did want to touch on really quickly before we kind of pressed on, or since we're hitting about the hour 20 mark. Looks like a lot of changes to the HMG in terms of the burst, and it looks like they've also increased their base effective range out to about 52.5 meters, which sounds roughly around where the plasma rifle is. Any thoughts on the HMG changes, guys?
Because its effective range is being increased, I really, really think that plasma rifles need to be buffed within CQC range. They currently, I guess this is off topic because we're talking specifically about HMGs, but I feel really strongly that plasma rifle users are getting crapped on compared to the other rifles, and even now, potentially now by the HMG, because they just do not have the benefit of doing strong damage within their range, and they're so outranged when it comes to other weapons. And I think this is an indirect nerf to them as well.
Well, I gotta ask, who was calling for a range increase to the HMG? I had not heard.
Every heavy who wants it to be more OP. Come on, man.
Yeah, the HMG is actually not terrible at mid range, and
it's not. It's not
really
at all.
solid.
And I've finished people off at long range with the thing. I mean, the
HMG is nasty. The HMG right now is every bit as potent as it was in Chrome, if not more. And I see no reason. The thing that I'm most happy about the HMG changes actually is the burst HMG is getting a huge heat buildup. It seemed like. Because right now, man, you can go through so many shots, and that thing is super forgiving if your aim is not spot on. And I don't think it should be. I think that if you're going to have that much burst DPS, you need to be accurate with it.
Well, it looks like they've increased the actual burst DPS and the overheat, so it's not as forgiving, but incredibly lethal. Essentially, if you zero a guy, if you put him on the high noon circle and you hit him with the full burst, I don't think there's anything tanking through that. Just based on the rough numbers I'm doing in my head right here, looking at this.
And that's why when in PC, if you're expecting to go up against another heavy, almost all really, really talented heavies, they only bring burst HMGs in PC now, because you're right, they're just deadly, man. If you can aim worth a crap.
No, that's still legit. Anybody else any thoughts on the HMG?
The damage, increasing the amount of damage compression, basically how much damage you're getting in a very short amount of time with the burst, will make it even a far more deadlier anti-infantry, almost anything, including other enemies.
Yeah, I almost feel like it needs a nerf. I'm sorry to say this, but I hate to be the guy that's calling out the HMG for a nerf, because everyone's going to QQ from Chrome on, where everyone that's been using the HMG from after Chrome. But I feel like the burst is just a little freaking OP.
Well, being specific is also key with any of these things, because harkening back to the days of the Logi roll nerf in response to the Cal Logi racial bonus, I've always been very meticulous about trying to say what we're talking about, because the burst and the general HMG don't function in anywhere near the same manner in most cases. All of that being said, range increase is somewhat surreal to me because it was almost top of my list for potential points to scale back the HMG just a touch. Before Charlie, it feels pretty solid for the most part, but a slight tone down as an HMG user did seem to be in order. And some of these changes, I don't know, we'll see how they play, but a range increase feels very odd to me as a direction to go.
Yep, no, I would totally agree with that. Now, that being said, I don't run heavy, so I don't want to. I mean, it just off the top of my head is like I get killed by those things, at pretty good range now, and this goes back to my comment, anytime when people talk about short range and long range stuff, the reality is the vast majority of engagements, the lion's share are definitely within, the range of the both combatants. It may be at the edges of both of them, but normally I suspect, and this is just my gut feel, is the majority of engagements between two individuals is well within the range that they can both affect the other player. So this is where I know it's a huge dance that they do with DPS and range and X, Y, and Z with the mechanics, but it's one that I don't know they'll ever be able to get right, because I don't know that you can get it right, because I don't think you're going to. I just don't see this being somebody finally saying, all right, we got it all right, everything's good. There's a lot of weapons, and it's a continual cycle. So in a way, I kind of expected, but yeah, that kind of took me by surprise when they increased the range. Really the only big thing that we haven't talked about is the drop suits, and particularly with the assaults. Looks like he took a huge clean sweep
Jaysyn,
broom through those. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Can I make one final comment on HMGs
please do.
I forgot to mention? One thing about the HMG range buff is I can, just by show of hands, and maybe not hands, but verbal hands, how many of you see freedoms about when you're, of all the HMG use, how many of you see freedoms?
I see Boundless quite often.
Boundless, Steel 9.
Boundless.
Yeah. Okay, so nobody ever sees freedom, or any of the assaults?
Very rarely. Well,
the only freedom thing I've ever
occasionally
seen is Mass Driver.
Occasionally, yeah.
You're never going to see them anymore either, because this is actually a nerf to them further. Instead of encouraging their use by telling people, hey, dude, if you want to shoot further, you need to use the freedom. This is actually a nerf to it.
Oh, no. It says changed base effective rate of all HMGs at all tiers to 52.5. The next sentence says assault HMGs still have increased range over basic and versed variants.
But they're never going to need to swap over to it because the range is just fine on the other ones.
No, I'm with you. But now, like, what are the assaults shooting out to now? Like 60 some odd, like combat rifle range?
You're never going to need it.
That's I don't know, man. I mean,
over the DPS you're going to miss out on in CQC. It's just the reason you're not seeing them enough right now is because HMGs as a medium range weapon are just it's not worthwhile to people already. And I think that this is a direct nerf to it overall.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It just dawned on me that clearly they can shoot out even further, which is even less HMG like than what we're used to. But that assault HMG compared to pretty much any other weapon other than other heavy machine guns, still pretty badass.
No, I agree with you. But then again, right, if you're using an HMG in the first place, you have the capacity to run those other ones that are going to be, for all intents and purposes, better.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So we got to dive onto the drop shoots just because that's a big sweeping change in terms of what they're doing to those things. As I'm just going to flip through, and this is really the assault suits. So they're buffing the HP on all the suits a little bit, which is probably good. When I say all suits, I'm just talking about all assault suits. And they also have basically now a frame-centric slot layout set. This is where a lot of the debates went back and forth, across the board. And there's been some CPU and PG changes across for assaults and sentinels, by and large. Let's see. All racial assault drop suits will also now give a 5% reduction in PG CPU requirements to grenades, in addition to the light and sidearm weapons. So that's actually not bad. That's a little bit further in terms of a roll bonus, but in terms of a fitting set. So sentinels, new slot layout for the sentinels, and looks like PG CPU adjustments, which the sentinels definitely needed. And then racial scout skill bonuses have clearly been adjusted, which that could be its whole own topic when you start pulling into the scout community. But let's focus on the assault.
God damn it.
We'll focus on the assaults and the sentinels real quick. What do you guys think about the changes to those two suit sets?
Well, real quick. I've always said that commandos and assaults were redundant, and we're kind of seeing the assaults pushing it more towards commando levels of HP. I think that's going to really kind of help solidify the role a lot and make them more viable, because the commando really does play like an assault now. So I'm really happy to see that. This is probably a topic for a different day, but I'd also like to maybe next week take a look at the Logis and make sure that they aren't totally left behind in terms of the HP, because the assaults are getting quite a significant buff. I think it's about 100 HP overall for all the suits. So that's a big deal for the medium frames as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's one concern that I have as well, is that one of the biggest reasons to buff EHP overall for assaults, especially on the base stats, which I thought was really smart, is because that it needs to be a larger gap between light suits and medium frames, and there needs to be a reason for you to sacrifice all of the benefits that you get as a scout for that extra stuff that you do get as an assault. And I think that right now what they've done is really made it so that assaults are going to shine in comparison and have strengths and weaknesses versus light suits. But I think that Logis are going to need to be revisited as far as EHP overall as well, because they're still comparable to light suits for the most part, unless you fully HP stack.
Yep, I'm going to have to agree with Pokey and my council bros on that one, that one of the standout issues there is the potential repercussions for support roles in Logi suits. But the rest of it, I'm pretty intrigued to see how it plays out. There are enough possible meta tweaks between the shift in base HP and the potential EHP shift with slot layout changes that it should be intriguing to see what the meta does in the future. I think it'll be there will probably be some surprises whenever you throw this much of a change at players. There's almost always something that happens that isn't expected.
Yeah, I mentioned one specific layout that somebody had come up and mentioned to me on ProtoFits for Cal Assaults. This next build, they're going to have 2 second shield delay with like 600 shields total, or 700 shields total. I think it's like 680 or something. And in addition to that, you're going to have a 50 shields a second recharge, because you can fit an Energizer on there as well. And that just sounds like amazing as an assault too.
Sounds beastly.
Well, that's I think what the assaults needed now. What I'd like to do is we'll wrap this up, and I think we still got some material for next week we got to talk about. We want to dive a little bit more into the Sentinel changes, which, like I said, I think particularly in the realm of the PG and CPU, there's a lot of good stuff that they needed to, there's a lot of stuff, whether we call it good or not, we'll get into that, but there's definitely some tweaks that they needed to make. My just sort of like gathered thoughts on the assault suits are, I think I like the direction he went. He didn't overdo anything, which is what we're normally concerned about. And I think it was a very measured approach. Now, this actually, I think, will lead us in something we can talk about next week, is now that we've made a clear adjustment to one half of the medium frames and a clear adjustment to the primary heavy frame, where does that leave scouts? Because they did do a lot of skill bonus changes to the scouts, so that I think that'd be a really good thing to touch on. So basically, I mean, if you look at it, the only suits that really didn't get touched were the commandos and the Logis, and I think they're not going to mess with the commandos too much in the future, just because there's too many overlaps between that and different areas. But the one thing that I'm concerned about is, it makes me wonder what they're going to do with the Logis, or what should they do, because now they've basically set the table with all of the other suit styles, or the classes, if you will. What does that mean for the support class? Where should it fit, and how should they keep it viable without crushing it or making it OP, which, that's how that goes. So I think next week what we can do is we can lead off with a discussion on the drop suit changes, and really what does that mean. And hopefully by next week, maybe we'll know about when Hotfix Charlie is going to drop, which I think would be even better. Let's see. What I think we can probably do now, guys, unless anybody has got any parting shots, we can, if you do, pipe in now. We can kind of go through shout-outs. And the thing I'll ask you, if you want to go through shout-outs, just because we said we were going to do it last week, but we'll do it this week. So if you've got your your favorite Guardians of the Galaxy character / Marvel Universe character, or any pop culture analog for anybody famous in Dust, or at least famous to you, that you want to make, feel free as part of your shout outs to do that when you give a shout out to them. So I'll give everybody a second to think about that one.
Can I go first? Can we go from the bottom up?
Yeah, absolutely, we could certainly do that. So with the first shout out and the first homage to the Guardians of the Galaxy, I would give you Zatara Rought.
I am Groot.
No, this is Zatara and signing out tonight. And I'd just like to give a brief shout out to my homie Skeletor Voltron and TTW3X and Dareth Eridor for carrying the FA flag through the summer months while I've been gone off on vacation numerous times. And thanks so much for all the hard work you guys have put in.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. And Soraya Xel.
Yeah, I am going to give a shout out to the goons that I chilled with this weekend. I was at a goon meet in Wisconsin, and it was a lot of fun. There was significant amounts of alcohol, of which I did not partake, but it was nonetheless amusing. And shout out to Scion, who is a CPM, or not CPM, CSM member, who I got to meet this weekend. So we had a nice chat. That was cool. And also a shout out to CCP Rought for making me get up at 5 a.m. That's all I got. And I got nothing on the Guardians of the Galaxy thing. I'm sorry. But kudos to Zatara for finding a way to insist on the name of the episode. So
well done. Okay, Pokey.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie yet, so I can't really speak for that. I'll probably pick that up this week. But shout out to my corp, OSG Planetary Operations. Shout out to Derry, who is actually in the middle of a move right now, so that's why he couldn't come and stream for us this week. And we'll see if he's available next week. But we always appreciate him, and he's here in spirit. So thanks, guys.
Okay, cool. Iron Wolf.
This is Wolf Saber, and I'd like to give the shout out to all the guys in SFG, keeping me entertaining throughout the week, and keeping me up to date to a couple of trends. So, and I need to put Guardians of the Galaxy on things I need must watch this week.
Excellent. And Cross.
Well, first and foremost, shout out to our fellow council bros over in the CSM 9. We've already had some interesting conversations with those cats, and I look forward to collaborating with all of you in the future. Be they from ground or space, I think all council bros are blue. So keep getting it done, guys. Shout out to CCP Rought for actually making that crazy hour meet brain at that hour, but he's very engaging and interactive, so appreciate that, CCP Rought. To OSG, obviously, you guys keep the game fun. Appreciate you keeping me honest and engaged rather than just in my own theory headspace. And finally, a shout out to Star-Lord, whose musical taste will prize the intro music for next week's episode, because I say so.
Well, good luck with that.
It shall be done. Yeah. This is Jaysyn Larrisen, and I really appreciate everybody having a good chat tonight. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, sometimes the ones that aren't streamed are actually usually some of the more fun ones. We did have a stealth guest who will probably join us, I suspect, next week. We'll have a special guest on next week, or at least not specials, but just somebody we all know and love. It's okay. But she's currently stealthing us right now. She's cloaky camping. Those of you on the east side, you know what I'm talking about. I'm waiting for a smart bomb to hit me. So with that, let's see, shout outs. I would like to shout out, and this is going to be a little bit odd, but there is a town called Gig Harbor up in Washington, and for a lot of people that some of you know me, I'm active duty military. This town called Gig Harbor actually did basically not a fundraiser, but they sponsored a picnic / organizational day for the unit that I'm in here this weekend. They raised probably $30,000. They fed well over 1,000 soldiers and their family, with some really good barbecue, put on huge softball, football tournaments, all kind of good stuff like that. But it was a really, really neat community outreach thing. So just a kind of a shout out to the town of Gig Harbor in Washington State. Like I said, little off my normal beaten track there for shout outs, but would like to throw that one. And in my homage to Guardians of the Galaxy, and I called this in the pre-show, to Judge Radamanthus, I now call you Ronan the Accuser. I can't think of anything that would probably work better. Plus, he's got the snazzy British accent, so I think that dials in really nicely. Other than that, I really appreciate everybody coming on the show tonight. It's always fun. We ran a little bit longer than we wanted to, which is kind of what we usually do. But it was a lot of fun, and I think what we've done is we've teed up some cool topics for next week, and hopefully we'll get all of you guys back on. We'll get another CPM update, and we'll dive into some talk about drop suits. Hopefully, talk about when Charlie's coming out, and whatever the random stuff that we want to pitch out there to you is. And as always, anybody that listens to this on iTunes or YouTube or whatever, feel free to hit us up on Skype, hit us up on Twitter, the forums, wherever. Always let us know if there's something you want us to talk about, or if you want to tee up directly to the CPMs. And I think that's something that I'll explore, is maybe gathering some direct questions for the CPMs. We'll read your name and everything, so it's all legit.
Like just crash the show and
we do that a lot
right on the show. So
and I'm sure we can do that on occasion. We can have open.
Don't be shy. Get a microphone. Come join us. It's lots of fun.
Absolutely. So
we'll only haze you a little bit if you're new.
Open mic night is coming. We're going to have to do that. And with that, guys, I think we're going to bring this episode to a close. Again, really appreciated it. And we'll see you guys all next week.